Now in this video, we're going to talk about how to repair bridges, docks, platforms, and other structures in SHTF. We're going to use methodology here that's used by the CBs. You can do this with people, and as long as one or two people know what they're doing, you can use unskilled labor to do these repairs. Now, the edition is NAVPER 10649-E as in Echo. We are on page 193, and what we're going to do is look at sections on bridges, docks, marine platforms, and look at how they're repaired. Now, you're going to need equipment to do this, but the problem is most people, even with the equipment, don't know how to do this work. I've done a lot of this stuff in the past. It's hard work, it's strenuous, and it's uncomfortable. But this is what is necessary to put things back in order. Now, these are concrete decks. This can be on bridges and it can be on docks. And what happens is that center portion is cracked and messed up. And below it, you can see the concrete piles. So we're going to look at different ways to cut this out and repair it. So what you would do is start by cutting out the damaged part. And then any damaged rebar, you would remove that. Then what you would do is piece back in rebar and tie it all back in together, put forms underneath of it, and pour a new decking section. These areas can be small or they can be really large. So the labor is mostly based on cutting the area out. That's the hard part. Building the forms, doing the rebar, and pouring the concrete's the easy part. Now, if you have a situation here like this, where you have a lot of deck damage, and you actually have one section of decking that's missing, that whole piece would be cut out. Then what would happen is it shows you here how to splice back in the joint. And the important thing is you got to have expansion joints when you make some of these repairs. Otherwise, as the weather changes, you'll get cracks and failure. Now, this is an interesting part here. What happens is you can have extensive bridge damage, and sometimes the pilings are damaged. And you'll have to repair the pilings also, or put new pilings in. Now, the thing to remember is you don't have to use concrete to make some of these repairs. You could actually use timber to make these repairs and put timber piles in and put a timber deck on here. So it is possible you could come right here in the old repair we looked at, and instead of using concrete, you could use a timber section. If you needed additional supports, you could actually drive additional timbers as a foundation and bridge the gap here. So keep in mind, just because something's made out of concrete or steel does not mean that you have to use concrete or steel to fix it. In a later video, I'll show you some easy ways to actually put timber piles in that you could actually do in an improvised manner in a disaster environment. Now, what we want to do is look at methods of repairing piles. So the pile is the foundation that supports the bridge, the pier, or the dock. And what we have here is a concrete one. So this is your concrete pile or concrete pier. And what happened is it's all tore up in here. So what happens is you have to remove the cracked and messed up material, expose the rebar, and then if you need to, you tie additional rebar in. Then you build a form around it, and you can see how the bottom of this form is closed, and then you would pour concrete in here in order to make a repair. Now, like I said, you could always put a sister pile in here that was wood if you needed to. Now, an interesting thing that you look at is sometimes, especially with blast loading or in a nuclear detonation, you might not collapse the bridge because bridges are hard to knock down if the nuke or the bomb goes off over top of them. And it may move them a little bit or compress them. And what would happen is you would have a lot of damage to the pile, so they'd be cracked. But what you can do is you can go in here and use a circular or a square form. You put it around it, you put a rebar cage in, and you pour concrete in it. Now, when you're looking at the detail, you see here in the middle this original pier right here, or pile, and then you have rebar and concrete around it. And you see here you need a minimum of 3 inches of concrete around the existing pile. So that's the way to repair it. If we hop over to page 195, this is a steel girder. So now what we're going to do is look at a steel pile. This is an I-beam or an H-beam. We're on page 195. You can see here that material is gone out of the inside here. That can be rust, that can be blast damage, that can be impact from a ship. A vehicle could have run into it. So what they do is they tack weld on some rebar. And if you cut it here and you look down on top, that's what it looks like. Then we have a circular form, and the military has steel ones that bolt around. You may be using wood. So build a wooden form, take pipe, cut it in half, weld it up, whatever you need to do to make your form, and you pour this full of concrete to reinforce the damaged area. Now on page 197, we have a critical thing here. If you have a stringer or joist that's under the bridge deck that is destroyed, you can see here that this replacement joist here does not make it all the way to the support. So what we have here is a splicing technique the military uses. So you can see this is a standard 12 by 12 inch stringer. We use a 5-inch cheater piece underneath of it, and then we have two splice pieces that are bolted. These are 1-inch bolts. This dotted line here is your actual, so this piece here is your actual drift bolt that was originally in this. And what you're doing is you're splicing this together. This gives you the dimensions and the information on how to make a correct splice on a bridge like this. This is a common repair. You're going to have to do this during SHTF. Now we're going to talk about a lot of timber bridge repairs here. This is important. You're going to have to do this. A lot of this is going to come in handy, especially if you're trying to maintain it. So let's say you got an improvised bridge in place. It's been 1.5 years and there's been a lot of traffic on it. You might have had some flooding. You might have had some rotten materials develop. You might have had some stuff run into the bridge. All kinds of things could happen. So here we are replacing and splicing one of the top beams here. This gives you the information on how to cut them, what drift pins to use, what size the material is. So this is repairing the top of the deck where you got top beams. Now, this is a very important diagram. This is on page 199. This is replacing the top of the piles. I've seen this a lot. So what happens is your bottom part here is intact, but the top is rotted, damaged. So what you do is you support this on cribs. You come in here, you put a board across here, you level that board, and then you cut the top of those piles. Then you put replacement pieces in here, and then you put new drift pins down through here. Now the important thing is you got to put all these fish plates and lag bolts in here in order to reinforce this joint. And if you read the directions on this page, it's going to give you the dimensions for this. Now, as we move down, we have another example where we have a lot of damage. Now, with this one, you can repair damage to both the piles and the cross timbers. So what we've done here is, on this side, we've jacked this up, cribbed it, we've added beams, we put a new drift pin in, and this is in a situation where you can get to the drift pin. Let's say that you can't jack this up much. You can jack it up enough to actually get this piece in here. These are fish plates that you can use to bolt this together. So it gives you the dimensions for the steel, and it gives you the bolt diameters you need. So this side represents a situation where you can't find drift pins or you don't have clearance to put them in. These are critical repairs on bridges. Now, the interesting thing is on bridges and especially docks, you get a lot of situations where you have bent timbers or you have ones that are eaten away by marine boars, okay, or rot damage. So you can do the same thing here we did to the bridge timber, where you put a form around it and you fill it with concrete. This is another example where instead of a concrete pier, we're doing wooden ones. So here we have the wooden piers, and we're repairing the damage from bores by putting forms up. We're putting concrete and rebar around them to reinforce them. This is a detailed picture. And once again, you'll see the original wooden pier or pile in the middle. And we need a minimum of 3 inches of concrete and rebar. So like I said, you should get a copy of this book. It has a whole lot more repair and how-to than what we've shown. But these are critical repairs you may have to do on bridges. So please share your comments. We'll see you on the next video.